the research shows is some people have become super users of this software, and that's great. But the folks who are not are hugely disadvantaged. And so it is very strange. Like almost everybody's used ChatGPT to play around with, but there's still large portions of the professional workforce that are not using the generative AI to their fullest power, or even minimally. And that's really frightening because you have one person now that can do the job of 100, and you have 99 people who haven't adopted these revolutionary technologies. And that's really, well, it has potentially frightening implications for our workforce.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I talked to some people a couple weeks ago. I was giving a keynote about AI to elder care organizations and hospice and stuff like that. And we were just talking about like the general basic use cases of how you can have ChatGPT create like a full diet and workout plan for you, right? And just seeing how people's ideas started coming out of their mind because they saw this technology as like an enablement layer of like, well, if I could do that, then what else can I do? Can I actually create like a customized food list for me that doesn't involve eggs or doesn't involve soy or something like that? I just think about there are some catalysts in time that help us think differently, that generate more ideas. But like you said, that superpower might be just creating a lot more mediocrity, right? All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the All Innovation, the AI podcast. Me and Dante are here once again co-hosting this journey with you guys, and we have another amazing leader, a CEO, Nick Jain, joining us here today, man. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dante and Keenan. Really excited to be here today.
Man, so we're super pumped to talk about not only what you guys are doing at IdeaScale and what that means, right, and the importance of ideas, but more so importantly, we want to kind of talk about innovation through two lenses. We talk about innovation, of course, through the lens of technology, but so much is changing in the ecosystem, if you will, of business, and we want to talk about what innovation means in that space as well. But before we kind of get started, man, a simple question for you. How's your heart doing today, Nick?
How's my heart doing? I think I ate a healthy breakfast. I rode for a little bit, so my heart hasn't exploded, so it seems to be doing okay.
I love it, man. Well, Dante, let's get into it, brother.
Yeah, Nick, to really kind of kick us off, I'd love to, have the audience better understand who you are and a little bit about your background. You have such an unconventional track, right? Going from Wall Street to trucking to moving into like a high-tech innovation space. So can you just tell us a little bit about what that journey looked like?
Sure. So, my name's Nick. I'm the CEO of IdeaScale. We're the largest innovation software company in the world. So really excited to be on an all innovation podcast, right in our wheelhouse. We've been around about 15 years, about 100 or so people across 9 or 10 countries now. Huge companies like Pfizer, Comcast, US Post Office, ING Bank, organizations that you live and deal with on a daily basis use us to make sure they are innovating well. And you can think of our software kind of like, it's like Facebook for ideas, right? Instead of posting funny cat videos or photos of your vacation, you post ideas and your social network interacts around those ideas, voting them, commenting them, etc. As for me personally, I've been here 2.5 years as CEO. Prior to that, as you mentioned, I'd worked in a shoe company, I'd worked in a trucking company, and spent about 10 years in Wall Street. So I would kind of describe myself as someone who knows how to run businesses really well, but then also really is thoughtful about the product or service that I'm delivering to my customers to make sure it's actually valuable, whether that be shoes or whether that be software.
Man, I want to know a little bit more about you. Simply touched on like the idea where you can have people vote on your idea. So we're talking about like a social concept, a social validation, right, system for validating ideas. Why are we kind of creating a platform that allows people to share their ideas and have them validated before the marketplace instead of just going straight into producing products as so many people do?
Well, I think we solve two really important problems. Number one is sometimes the people with the best ideas don't have a natural mechanism to get those ideas turned into products or things. Imagine you are this is a real example. There was a janitor in a Walmart warehouse, right, who had an idea for a new stepladder. How is that going to get to the chief operating officer's front desk? This is a guy like 8 levels apart. And in this case, it did. He was actually showed off at a Walmart shareholder meeting, but imagine that happening. That doesn't happen normally, right? So that's number one. And number two is there's a lot of ideas floating around any organization. Some are good, some are great, some are terrible, and you need a system for filtering that out. And so what our software does is again, think of it like a social network. You and your friends, me, we're all posting stuff. And most of the stuff that we're posting is kind of garbage or mediocre, right? But then there's a couple posts that you post or that I post or your aunt posts or your friend in Japan posts that are truly that extraordinary and they really take off. And some even better than that, sometimes they're great but not quite perfect. And your idea can help. Your idea commenting on somebody else's can make it and tune it and make it just perfect. So that's why a platform like ours is really powerful, especially for large distributed organizations, which pretty much any major organization is nowadays.
Man, Dante, this reminds me of like the fire hot Cheetos, right? If you guys ever heard this story, right? There's a janitor who actually came up with fire hot Cheetos. And he was actually kind of mixing some spicy stuff together. Once again, got attention of the CEO, and now he created a product that people have fallen in love with. But if he didn't have a platform to validate his idea within the business,
right?
Incredibly difficult.
Yeah,
right?
if you run into the CEO while you're walking through on your day, great. But that's most companies, most people don't have that opportunity. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And what we try and make those once in a lifetime communication opportunities into everyday realities.
I'm curious. I love this idea so much, but I feel like some of the leaders that we've spoken with in the past, one of the struggles is like having a culture where people feel safe to even share ideas. Do you seem to run into issues when you're, really trying to sell this mission to organizations where it's like, hey, everyone's going to feel comfortable enough to share maybe an idea that someone else thinks is stupid, right?
Sure. So it's interesting because most of our customers come to us and they understand that might be a reality, but they're trying to break that reality, right? They want almost any leader in any legitimate organization that wants to be impactful is saying, we want our best ideas from our best people, no matter what they look like, where in the world they sit, how young, how old, etc. So our customers generally aren't worried about that beyond like, hey, that might be where they're starting from and they want to move away from that. And as an example of what happens when you use our software really well, so I'll give an example from us using our own software. If anybody goes to ideas.ideascale.com, it's totally public. You can go participate. You can see, there's also a secret version of it that you can't see, but the public version, you can see all of our employees, all of our customers, me posting ideas. And there was an idea I posted just 2 weeks ago that people downvoted like crazy. People are, my own employees, my own customers are voting down the CEO's ideas and saying, Nick, this is dumb. You haven't thought it through. And that's exactly, so that it's great that we've accomplished it here, but that's exactly what we're trying to help accomplish for our customers as well.
Man, like that does sound like there's an element of like vulnerability that's kind of involved in this process, right? How do you feel when you share an idea and people downvote it? You know what I mean? Are you ever caught up in like the moment of the ego? Just very transparently, it's like my ideas should be great, you know what I mean? But what does everybody else think about them?
Sure. So I think my ego is generally, not affected by any one idea. I'm pretty confident who I am as a person, and it's like everyone has dumb ideas, and I get that. Einstein, I'm sure, had dumb ideas too along the way. What I do sometimes feel sheepish about is when I post an idea and someone's like, Nick, well, have you thought about this? And I'm like, oh, no, I haven't, right? Oh, that's really bright. So I don't feel scared because I know that at least in my organization, people understand that they can attack the idea or iterate on an idea without attacking the person behind that idea, whether that be me or whether that be somebody else. But I certainly do feel humanly sheepish when like I missed something that was like obvious that I should have gotten. But that's okay, right? Now, in a company, if you can separate the individual's ego from the value of an idea, that's how companies and organizations excel. There's a lot of research on this approach. It's called an idea meritocracy, where people can separate their egos, their personalities, their vulnerabilities, as you mentioned, from the ideas, strengths, merits, weaknesses, etc.
Yeah, I think that's really incredible. I'd love to go a little bit further back and talk a little bit about your history and kind of how we got here. What were the early days of like being in Wall Street like, and how do you feel some of that experience shaped the leader that you are today?
Sure. I spent about 10 years or so on Wall Street as a professional investor at large billion-dollar organizations, investing in both private equity as well as public stocks. And I think it was a really great formative experience in 3 ways. Number one, at the age of 22, I got to be in the room with the CEOs of billion-dollar companies. I wasn't saying anything. I was sitting in the background learning and absorbing, but that's a tremendous learning experience when you can see world-class leaders doing what they're great at. Number two, I got exposed to a bunch of different industries. So I had, on one week, I might be looking at an aluminum company. The next week, I'm looking at a medical devices company. The next week, I'm looking at a chemicals company. And getting to work with individuals in all those areas. So that gave me a better sense of what types of organizations are out there. And number three, you work really, really hard. You're working 100 hours a week. So that's like doing 2 or 3 jobs. So you learn 2 or 3 times as fast as you would in many other jobs. And those are obviously skills and learnings that benefit me here today, because I think I've seen more than a lot of other leaders who are my age.
What did you notice that was the biggest difference about the CEOs of those billion-dollar companies compared to like the rest of us? Because you had to be at 22 years old kind of looking and listening and learning a lot from how these people presented, how they communicated. What were some of the differences?
I'll say this, right? Number one, a lot of CEOs are just, in all candor, are regular people who've just hung around long enough and been good enough. They're not all CEOs are extraordinarily better than everyone else, right? I think that's a misnomer. Certainly, you have some of the tech billionaires who literally built their billion-dollar companies. Hands up, but the most CEOs just they hung around at an organization. They're reasonably smart and they got lucky. But aside from that, I think one skill set that was constant across most of these successful executives or CEOs that I saw, where they were very, very effective communicators, regardless of their style, right? Some were more aggressive, some were less aggressive, some were shy, but they were all good at communicating what they needed and what they wanted from their people or from their external partners.
Yeah. Go ahead.
How do you feel that you I really like that idea of really like sharpening your tongue as a leader. I feel like it's so important to be able to have the skill set to be able to communicate your ideas effectively. How do you feel like you've implemented some of that, some of those learnings in IdeaScale today?
Sure. I think there are three things that some of which I brought with me and some of which I think my predecessor Rob built into IdeaScale's DNA. I'll start with kind of thematically or strategically at IdeaScale. It's an incredibly transparent organization. That culture of an idea meritocracy is something my predecessor built and I've continued to nurture. And I think that's really good because it means when you can tell the truth to people, you don't have to double talk or say things behind people's backs. You can be honest. That's true. So we have a good feedback culture. We're honest about, we have a product and people, if you listen to our product channel, people are saying this is good, this is bad in a very active, candid way that in a lot of organizations you wouldn't. Number two is I think I have always been a believer in respect. And respect comes from just being a human being, and I don't think it comes from your title. So I certainly try and respect everyone, no matter how junior they are, no matter where in the world they sit, and I expect that back. And I think that is an important part of my communication style, that I will respect the other party no matter what. They are a human being; they're worthy of dignity. And then thirdly, as I think about my own communication style, I know that I have a certain way about thinking about the world that doesn't necessarily match the way you would think about the world or that Keenan would think about the world. And so seeing what I've seen in other great leaders, I certainly try and tailor my communication style to better match my audience, even if it cuts against my natural inclinations or styles.
So we're talking a lot about ideas here. And, over the last couple of years, we've seen the explosion, right, of technology, of AI. People are auto-generating images, auto-generating videos with things like Sora. People are coming up with copy instantaneously, being able to better communicate their ideas. How do you kind of think about the superpower, if you will, that this generation, this pocket in time has right now by having AI at their fingertips and how that actually impacts the ideas that people create?
Sure. So a superpower can also be a super curse, right? Didn't Superman live? Superman lived long enough to see all of his friends die in the end of the universe, right? And in one of the 1970s comic books. So I'll say there's two things that are really great in the context of ideas, and one thing that's really bad, with specific to this new AI technology. Number one is these new AI technologies allow you to prototype much quicker. Okay, so if you have an idea that is half baked, you can fully bake it with an AI much, much more quickly. Number two is you can communicate it more effectively. There's a lot of people who are not great writers or trying to communicate in a language that is not their native language. And that's hard, right? If you speak in broken English to me, I might think your idea is stupid, even though it was a great idea. It was just not communicated effectively. And AI can now make it much easier for you to communicate that idea eloquently, not just adjusting for language, but lengthening it out, fleshing it out in a way that you may not be capable of because you may not be a great writer, or I may not be a great writer. So those are, I think, the two really good things. Again, to reiterate, number one, prototyping things really quickly, and number two, communicating those things much more effectively as received by an audience. I think the downside of the superpower is more at a kind of organization or social level. The research shows is some people have become super users of this software, and that's great. But the folks who are not are hugely disadvantaged. And so it is very strange. Like almost everybody's used ChatGPT to play around with, but there's still large portions of the professional workforce that are not using the generative AI to their fullest power, or even minimally. And that's really frightening because you have one person now that can do the job of 100, and you have 99 people who haven't adopted these revolutionary technologies. And that's really, well, it has potentially frightening implications for our workforce.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I talked to some people a couple weeks ago. I was giving a keynote about AI to elder care organizations and hospice and stuff like that. And we were just talking about like the general basic use cases of how you can have ChatGPT create like a full diet and workout plan for you, right? And just seeing how people's ideas started coming out of their mind because they saw this technology as like an enablement layer of like, well, if I could do that, then what else can I do? Can I actually create like a customized food list for me that doesn't involve eggs or doesn't involve soy or something like that? I just think about there are some catalysts in time that help us think differently, that generate more ideas. But like you said, that superpower might be just creating a lot more mediocrity, right? Rather than
Well,
actually the
it's not
good
that it's
ideas that
creating
kind of come out of there.
mediocrity. At least. I don't think it's making people worse off. I'm not too worried about the decline of creativity or things like that. What I'm worried about is if you have a couple people that are using these technologies extraordinarily well and the other people are not adopting them, they're at such a disadvantage. And it's such a big disadvantage that has really broad societal implications. And a really silly example is I use ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude probably 40 or 50 times a day. I use them for coding. I use them for writing emails for legal emails, writing emails to my in-laws, whatever, right? And then I have a neighbor who's, roughly the same age as me. He's a lawyer and he is not using this technology at all. And that is really kind of frightening because, I could do, it creates such a dramatic difference in productivity.
I mean, we don't have the ability to rest on our laurels. You know what I mean, Dante? You can't just like sit back and watch this technology explode in front of you and then continue to say, I'm just going to do it the same way that I always was.
No, the choice is, whether or not you like generative AI, the genie's out of the bottle. You absolutely have to adopt these technologies, or you suffer the consequences. It's like you don't have a choice to be on the internet or not, right? Or you don't have you don't have a choice to not be on a social network or not. You can choose not to be on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, but there are real consequences to you making that life decision.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, and I say this all the time, and sometimes Keenan asks me to bring it up, but you take 30 linear steps and you're at 30. But if you take 30 exponential steps, you're at a billion. And I think what people really don't realize is that we're at the bottom of this exponential curve of AI and how fast it's going to be able to really begin to learn. We speak with leaders who are really on the forefront of what AI can be. And some of the things that we've talked about in the last even several weeks kind of really blew my mind with, I can't even recall some of the things that we talked about, but they're ultra innovative.
Can I just interject for one second? When you said, I did the math for the 30 exponential steps, and yeah, it's a billion and something. I thought it was kind of a flippant quote, and then I actually did the math in my head for a second, and yes, 2 to the power of 30 is like a billion.
I love that you're the first person
to actually double check the math. Exactly.
I run a tech company. Almost everyone who runs a tech company understands the powers of 2, very, very well. 2 to the power of 10 is 1,000. 2 to the power of 30 is a billion.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
That's so funny. Yeah, but this technology is moving so fast, and one of the questions I have for you is, where does this go, and where does this leave ideas in our organization and the people that work within our organizations? One of the things that we like to talk about often is that with AI moving so rapidly and being able to replace some of the tasks that you do day to day, you're having maybe junior level coders replaced because you're able to decode with AI. You're having maybe a copywriter replaced because you're able to use AI for copywriting. What does this do to the size of our teams and organizations today? Do they collapse? Do these jobs get replaced or displaced? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So it's kind of a weird question for me to answer because I'm a small growing organization, right? So unlike, let's say, a large organization that has a lot of fat, I'm not, consolidating jobs and shutting jobs down. Quite the opposite. It's just I'm hiring people, but I'm expecting them to be 5 or 10 times more productive and more capable, right? So, for example, I asked our video producer to produce 200 videos in the past week. 240-minute videos in the past week. That would be,
Wow.
I would never have asked somebody that 18 months ago, right? That's, a year or 2 years worth of work. And this time I said, can you get it done in a week? And she said, no, I'll get it done in 2 weeks. But imagine me making that same request, or you making that same request to someone 2 years ago. That would be absurd. That would require 10 people working for 6 months to do.
So how do you continue to think about that idea, right? I was listening to a podcast one time, and there was a guy named Jason Fried. He was the founder of 37 Signals. They made Basecamp, right? That organization.
Yeah.
He was talking about, me as the CEO, as a founder, right? My objective in the organization is to intentionally inject risk into the organization through bringing up ideas like, hey, create 200 pieces of content at 40 minutes each, but it's going to take you a week to do it. Naturally, people aren't going to push themselves that far, right? Especially in a way in which we've been rooted in doing the things that we've always done them. So how do you think about kind of pushing the team or injecting risk, if you will, to do things differently from how they've done it?
Sure. So let me think about this for a second. So I am a big believer in taking calculated risks. I play poker in my personal life. On Wall Street, it was all about taking calculated risks. And in running a company, I do agree. I wouldn't say I inject risk. I encourage people to take risks that make sense, even if they have a high probability of failure, as long as the potential payoff is high enough, right? I'm going to buy a 1 in a billion lottery ticket if it has a chance of winning $1 trillion. That's a great lottery ticket to buy. So that's, I think on the risk side, I would say I at IdeaScale, and we as IdeaScale as an organization, do take risks where they make sense. In fact, we are encouraged to take risks, and that's part of our decision-making framework here. Secondly, about pushing people to, extend beyond their own expectations. I don't know if, so I'm not a founder, but I certainly kind of demand that as a CEO. That's in fact what my board has mandated me to do, like get more every year, go win more in the market. And the only way I can go win more in the market is for us mutually to push each other. I expect my team to push me harder, and I'm sure my team expects me to push them harder as well.
You'd mentioned going into the market. I'm kind of curious, with everything that you have going on at IdeaScale, how do you find yourself communicating directly with customers to learn more about what they want and better understanding how to solve those problems? One of the things you said at the top of the call was, I want to make sure that my product's really valuable, right? And that idea translates to any business that you're in, because ultimately your businesses are in the problem solving business, right? And so I'm curious how your take on that.
Sure. I think we do it 3 ways. Number one is data, right? Unsurprisingly, we're a tech company. I can monitor, I can see the metadata of what you're using. I can see how many times a day you're logging into my software, how many ideas you're submitting, the same way LinkedIn or Facebook can see how many things you're posting, how many things you're commenting, how many things you're scrolling on. So that's number one. We spend a lot of time looking at our data, both at an aggregate level, as well as when we launch a new feature, what's the usage of this feature? Let's analyze that. That's number one. Number two, we have lots of, we are talking to our customers on a daily basis. We have a 24/7, 365 live human tech support team. We have a white glove service CSM team that is talking with all our customers, typically every day to every 2 weeks, depending on how complex the customer is. And then we have a product team that's also out there talking to the customers when they need active feedback on a new thing. So there's all these informal, unstructured channels for communication to make it back. And then thirdly is obviously ideas.ideascale.com. We actively encourage people to tell us, hey, what do you think of our product? There's good and bad stuff. Again, you can go, there was a comment posted by one of our customers, not a comment, an idea posted by one of our customers. He said he loved our new feature, except we screwed up part of the exporting functionality, and he wants that changed. That's great, right? We both got some good feedback there, but also a tactical suggestion for how we can make our software better. Right? And now we may or may not agree with it. We haven't analyzed whether his suggestion is good, but it's phenomenal that he's making it, because that means we can hear it. Because if you don't speak up, no one hears you.
I mean, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know what I mean? Creating a safe space, allowing for people to actually give ideas, and then use those ideas to improve your own product, which shares that you guys are actually listening to the ideas, and then it actually kind of elevates those ideas as well. I want to share a little story about an idea and kind of talk about the differences in flat organizations and hierarchical structured organizations, right? Many people who are listening to the podcast say, hey man, like I've got great ideas, but I can't get the attention, right, of my CEO. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, it's very difficult. And a lot of ideas are built in organizations. I mean, if we think about like the 1/5 terminology that Google uses, that's where like Gmail and things came from. One day out of the week, they allow for their team members to work on their own ideas, but that
yes.
IP
I
technically
think it was called
belongs to
20% time. 20%
20%
time or
time,
10%
exactly.
time. Yeah.
Beautiful. So one of the ideas that came from an organization that I was following back in the day, Tesla, right? There was an engineer on the floor who was putting together battery packs in, I want to say, northern Sparks, Nevada, which is outside of Reno. And he found something in putting the battery packs together. If they just made a simple change in the schematic of how the battery packs are put together, they could get like 20% faster charging. Now, what he did, because the organization is flat, is he took it to his manager, and within 3 hours, they made a change to the assembly line to have that idea implemented. How important do you think that flat structure of an organization is like Tesla to get those ideas to impacting the actual organization as quick as possible compared to like the hierarchical structure that we've seen?
So I want to just clarify the nomenclature here, right? Tesla, I imagine, is a incredibly hierarchical organization. There's Elon Musk and like 40 levels between him and the individuals, running the plants. But even though there's a very strong hierarchy between the world's, I think, richest or second richest man and the average shop floor worker, the story you just described implies that the communication latency or the communication barriers are very low. So you can have an incredibly hierarchical organization where there's a boss and a boss's boss and a boss's boss and a super billionaire at the top, but good ideas still percolate incredibly quickly. So I don't have a perspective on hierarchy, but I do have a perspective on communication. And there is a ton of research out there that fast communication where best ideas win makes a huge difference. I think there's a seminal study from the late 1990s or 1980s from, I want to say, the MIT Sloan School of Business, which basically says one of the best predictors of your stock price performance is how effective or how quickly information travels through your organization.
I think it's really interesting to me how there's a hierarchical structure, right? But communication in itself, because I've heard Elon even talk about in the example of Tesla is like there are no barriers to getting to me, right? When it comes to good ideas and communication, I feel like it's so important for us to kind of think about how impactful a simple idea can be to impacting a huge organization and an industry as we kind of experience it today, which is so cool. There are so many different studies, like you said out there, that talk about the impacts of technology and communication and how we kind of create opportunities in organizations. When you kind of think about how you've changed as a leader from that 22-year-old kid who was sitting in the boardroom looking at billionaire CEOs, what are some of the key ideas that maybe you've had to break inside your head that you thought great leaders represented as you kind of sit here today from where you were as a 22-year-old?
I think there are three things that I've kind of had to break over the past 10 or 15 years, or maybe incorrect assumptions I had as I headed into the workforce. Number one is, I think coming out of college, I assumed that being smart was the most important thing to driving organizational success, or the only important thing. I still think that IQ and intellectual prowess and understanding complex situations is important, but I probably weighted that down from 95% to, 50 or 40% in terms of what actually drives success, both for an individual as well as for an organization. Number two is an understanding that ideas require execution. Coming out of college again, it was, hey, great idea, it'll obviously work, right? But I've seen so many great ideas that don't actually take off in the market due to poor execution. And the same idea, with great execution, or even a worse idea with great execution can succeed. The market is not a rational, rational deterministic engine. And then the third is just an appreciation that the world is incredibly, incredibly complex, both from a human and organizational point of view. and it is difficult ex ante to try and predict it. So rather than trying to predict the world, I think it's much more, or I've trended towards trying to be resilient against how the world may change in ways that I don't predict, both at an individual level, but also at an organizational level.
Nick, when I hear you speak, especially with what you just said, you have such a poise about you and such wisdom that you've learned through, I'm sure hard work, trial and error, all of the above. I'm curious your take on this growing idea of leaders like yourself, founders and CEOs, wanting and needing to be more forward-facing to the world, creating content, creating video content, being on podcasts. I'm curious, what's your take on this idea of founder-led marketing, and your idea of the importance of being the voice of the brand?
Sure. So I want to be very clear. I'm not the founder of IdeaScale. My predecessor, Rob Hohen, was. I was brought in as an external CEO. But I have kind of mixed thoughts on this. So number one, I'm not a marketer or salesperson by training. I think I'm a really good operator. I'm a scientist. So I'm not someone who's naturally inclined to be out there marketing and selling my product. In fact, I hate being on sales calls because I don't want to misrepresent the truth ever and oversell a product. So I personally am not inclined to do that. However, and this is the advice I got from my board from some senior mentors, I think there are two advantages to executives, whether they be CEOs or chief product officers, being out there to be the face of the brand. Number one, it shows that the executives are willing to personally attach themselves to the brand. And that you wouldn't do that if you're selling snake oil, right? I care about my reputation too much to be out there putting my face on something or my name on something that is fake or that is unethical. Number two is it makes you much more, if you're out there talking about your product, your service, your ideas, it makes you much more cognizant of your customers' reception of your product and your ideas. If I sat inside as a CEO, just designing product and doing coding or doing finance stuff, then I'm not out there putting stuff out in the market that the customers react to and say, no, Nick, you're wrong, or this is not what we need. And that means I'm going to be much less effective because at the end of the day, whether you're a public sector organization or private sector organization, you are providing a product or service to someone, right? The post office is a public sector entity, but they're providing a product and service or a service to you and I. And it is important for any such organization to get feedback from the market to make sure that they are headed in the right direction. The easiest way is obviously to get feedback right at the senior most levels.
I want to ask, when you were a younger kid, right? What was one idea that you wish you would have pursued that maybe you didn't? Did you ever lay awake at nighttime thinking about an idea about becoming an astronaut or creating something, a product, a solution, or something like that maybe you didn't pursue?
Yeah, I can think of lots of them. The one that really gets me is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So I was actually an early investor in Bitcoin, and I wrote one of the earliest.
What year?
Sorry?
What year?
This was around 2011.
Okay.
Please tell me you did not sell your Bitcoin for a pizza.
I did, but not due to. When I joined on Wall Street, one of the when you're working Wall Street, it's a highly regulated industry. They want to prevent insider trading, so you have to be very careful about what assets you own, right? And as part of compliance, I actually had to sell all my Bitcoin because they didn't want me doing things in the background. Perfectly legitimate purpose. Lots of other people had to make that same decision. But my regret is not about selling the Bitcoin so much as I had an idea about basically a brokerage. I noticed that there were all these little cryptocurrency exchanges that were trading cryptocurrencies at different prices, and I was like, look, that's not how stock markets should work. That's not how markets should work. There should be a centralized exchange where all of this is cleared and dealt with professionally, rather than a bunch of sketchy people doing this, out of their mom's basements or whatever, right? Which was basically what cryptocurrency was in 2011. And so obviously a bunch of people went out and did this. Since then, you have Coinbase, you have, FTX blew up spectacularly, unfortunately, due to fraud, but there's a lot of legitimate exchanges that have built up, a lot of legitimate organizations that have built up exchanges. And I think this was something that I was excited to do. I have a theoretical math background, so I really tied in well with my math background. It tied in with my Wall Street background. And obviously it's, would have taken off quite spectacularly, potentially, obviously, depending on execution.
I mean, I believe in your ability to execute, Nick. I mean, so here's one of the things that I heard back in the day is like FTX was able to grow to such a large organization because they saw an arbitrage opportunity where on one exchange, Bitcoin was selling for like 36 grand, and on another, it was selling for like 42 grand. And they were literally buying on one exchange, transferring to a wallet, and then selling it same exact time, and then just accumulating cash and dollars,
Exactly.
which is crazy.
I don't think FTX, by the time Bitcoin was at 36,000, 42,000, the arbitrage had closed down significantly, but that, because that's a 30% price gap. But that 30% price gap did exist back in 2011. For those of your audience who are familiar with Mt. Gox, which was a Japan-based Bitcoin exchange that went down due to apparently hack. But at that point, there was like literally 30% free money, and ignoring the fact that you could make free money as a trader, the very fact that there were these arbitrages meant that there was a need for a central repository. Like today, if you want to buy a share of Microsoft, whether you're buying it in Japan, Tokyo, Hong Kong, France, the United States, the price of Microsoft stock is the same. And that is because there's these centralized exchanges that equalize prices.
Yep.
And that is so important for any asset, whether you're trading corn, Microsoft stock, or Bitcoin, or any other cryptocurrency for that matter.
Dante, what's an idea that you've had that you didn't act on? We would love to hear it.
Man, putting me on the spot. Yeah, I think since we brought up crypto, I think just buying and holding would have been smarter than actively trading. Actively trading is so much fun. I was trading in the bear market, but I think there's a point where I would have been better off if I just bought and hold rather than actively traded. So,
fun fact, that's the true for most stock investments as well. Almost all
Literally.
buy and hold investors outperform active traders. And this has been well established for decades.
One of the early investors in Tesla actually was on a show, C-SPAN or something like that, and they were like, "So the market's super down right now," and he was like, "The market's always down. The market's always up. But guess what? I'm a billionaire because I just hold and I ignore all the news and I just hold over a long enough time horizon, and now I'm a billionaire," which is crazy. My personal idea was back in 2014, 2015. I started seeing a lot of people around like a lunch as friends or a dinner as friends. And every single person was having to either decide how they're going to split up the bill when you have a large group at a table, right? They're like, we can only split it 3 ways. I was thinking, shouldn't there be an ability for us to hop on an app, all have our bank accounts, be able to send our portion of the money to a centralized transaction, and then we could transact via Apple Pay with one transaction, and then everybody could just contribute their own little halves. That still has not been something today. So if somebody's listening to this, you guys can take that idea from me. But I feel like that split payments element is something that is an idea that I never pursued, that I kind of will kick myself for later when I'm older.
Yeah, Venmo. I think Venmo does it now, but I remember you first sharing this idea in like 2013. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, you're early."
I know, exactly. Being early is the same as being wrong, is what they say, man. So here's a question for you, Nick. So when it comes to, all the responsibility that you have, right, as a CEO of this organization, you said you're young, you guys are growing, you guys are lean. How do you kind of stay in a good place of like perspective from a mental wellness perspective? Because CEOs have a ton of stress, right? Of course, we have boards that want to give us objectives that we need to hit. But how do you kind of stay grounded in having fun in this process of being the leader of IdeaScale?
Yes, I'm not going to lie. My job is stressful. I have a lot more grades at this age than my father did, or my mother. I think there's 2 things. Number one, I'm very fortunate to be in a job in a company that I love, right? What's that old joke? The last day you work is the day you find a job you love. So it's a lot easier to do something and work insane hours and deal with stress when you actually like what you do. That's number one. I like building IdeaScale. I like our product. I like our customers. I like the fact that we actually make a difference for our customers. That's number one. And not just for customers. I like the physical aspects of my job. I like playing around in finance for a while, then doing some engineering stuff, and then talking to product and talking to sales ops. So that's number one. I like my job. But number two, I have passions and interests outside of work. So I have a family. I play poker semi-competitively. I work out. Right now I'm building a small real estate investment business on the side. Like, these hobbies keep me excited so that when for whatever reason, if I'm too stressed from my day job, I have other things to help balance out life. And that's important. That's an important part of being a fulfilled human being. You must have things going on in life beyond just one thing. Unidimensional people tend to be less satisfied with their lives, whatever that unidimension tends to be.
So Nick, go ahead, man.
Oh yeah, just last question, Keenan. Nick, if there's a future someone who is really inspired by your story and wants to be a CEO in the future, what's one piece of advice that you would impart to that young, future leader?
I'll give two for the price of one. Number one, learn to code. I think it just makes your life so much easier when you can automate stuff. And number two, invest in continuous education. A lot of people just stop learning formally after they leave college. And I think there's so much happening in the world, new skills to develop, that if you don't constantly take and do active learning, you fall behind pretty quickly. So for example, I think pretty much everyone who's working with a computer these days should go take a 5-hour course on prompt engineering for ChatGPT or Gemini. And I bet you 99% of people haven't, right? They're free, and yet people still don't. And that I took one of those ChatGPT prompt engineering courses, and I think over the course of 10 hours, I got like 10x better at using ChatGPT.
So here's a question for you. One of our traditions on the podcast is our previous guest wants to ask you a blind question, Nick. Okay? So here's a scenario. Nick comes across $1 million in cash in a duffel bag on his way to the gym today, right? He cannot spend that money on his own business, and he has to spend that money on an experience. What are you doing, and who are you taking with you?
Okay. Let me give a serious response. Firstly, I'm calling the police department to report that there's
that's cash free. The money's good. You know,
no,
what I'm
just
saying?
an ethical principle, right? Like,
Okay,
if I find $1 million, some poor person has lost $1 million, and I want to make sure I'm not, taking away someone's, deposit on their home or whatever, right? Like, as a base, but I'm not saying that flippantly. I would feel really bad if I stole someone's life savings, even if by accident. Secondly, I think what I would do with that $1 million, I would take my in-laws, my parents, on a luxury vacation somewhere. Both my in-laws and my own parents are from pretty humble beginnings. They've traveled a little bit, but certainly never been on a luxury vacation. For matter of fact, nor have I. But I think for that, my parents are typical bootstrapped immigrants, and my in-laws are from a small town in Vermont. And I think it would be very nice for them to have that experience once in their lives, to see this is a really cool ultra luxury experience. That could be a trip on a yacht, or it could be just a road trip through Japan, something that you can't do for $1,000, but $1 million would certainly make possible.
Well, man, we can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast, Nick. Seriously, talking about the work that you guys are doing at IdeaScale, but also the importance of ideas, how we can share them, how we can have them validated by the marketplace, and be that kernel, if you will, of a future that somebody has the confidence to share is so important to us, man. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Seriously.
Thank you for having me. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity.
All right, guys, that's the pod. We'll catch you in the next one.